Hello, welcome to another CASA talk. And this time I'm talking to Mike Mills, and we're going to focus on the CASA25 event that's coming up in September. Mike is with Gamma and is a gold sponsor at the event, which we're very happy with, of course. So, Mike, welcome. And let's start there. Why did you decide to sponsor the event, and why did you decide to join the alliance at the start of this year?
Yeah, hi Rob. Thanks for having me today. It's great to catch up. I think from our perspective, we were always keen to join the alliance because the CPaaS market and kind of the enablement and growth of the CPaaS market has always been a really important part of our service provider business that I run. We've worked with CPaaS providers for well over 10 years and have been on the kind of journey. And many of them have gone from a historical messaging business into a global business, and now pivoting more into CX and engagement and hyper personalization and all of those sort of things. So for us, first and foremost, it's about demonstrating and delivering on that commitment that we're a really important part of the supply chain for CPaaS providers, and we can add value, and we really understand the business model. In terms of the event, I think for us it's a chance to branch out and really get our messages across to perhaps some of the providers that don't know who we are or what we're doing strategically and the direction of travel that we're going in around building a global network and capability that's ultra consumable for CPaaS providers and anybody in that engagement CX customer experience market.
Yeah, makes sense. You guys have been doing a lot of expansion in the last 12 or 18 months, right? So you branched into Germany with a platform, you branched into global number and telco business with the acquisition of Coolwave. It sort of all seems to come together at the event because you have these different angles that you can talk about.
Yeah, I think we've got a kind of, depending on the customer profile, we've got a very specific set of capabilities that ultimately hang together nicely. But for each of the various markets, whether they be geographical or route to market that we operate in, we have different go-to-market models and different capabilities. So, for example, the wholesale business I run, we're building a wholesale network, and we're doing that at scale for service providers and cloud communication providers and CPaaS providers. And then on top of that, that becomes the delivery layer for a lot of our other routes to market. So we've got a strong MSP business in the UK. We're plugging that network in under the hood of all of our products so that they have access to the footprint and capability that we're building in specific regions, along with all the licensing and regulatory pieces and compliance and all the stuff you need as a telco. Then if you look at some of the enterprise routes to market, we've overlaid a service capability. So we bought Bright Cloud last year, which is a Cisco CX business, and actually does more than Cisco these days. And then you add in what we've done in Germany. And Germany for us was always and continues to be a massive opportunity. Just from a cloud adoption perspective, our experience in Germany over the last probably 2 or 3 years has taught us that unless you're running a meaningfully scaled German business, it's really difficult to actually go into that market and be successful. So very much there, the drive is to really give ourselves the tools, capability, route to market, go to market model that we know is succeeding in Germany. And I think if you look at both the Placetel acquisition and the Starface acquisition, they're really there to give us a strong go-to-market capability, both digital and sort of people related in that specific territory.
I like what you say about these different go-to markets and different customer profiles because the ecosystem is it's not getting simpler. Right, we have telcos that are both suppliers but also channels for these solutions. There's sort of a deglobalization trend that I'm picking up on this year. So I think a European player like Gamma has probably some interesting new opportunities there. One of the themes at the event is that go to market, right? The telcos that need to transform, but that also could bring the services to market, but then also network APIs that are services they deliver to the rest of the industry. You run that channel business, that indirect business at Gamma, and I was at your event a couple of months ago in London, where I got to see that diversity of partners that you work with. When you look ahead, what's the most important trends that you see in your channel partners?
I think you raise a couple of really interesting topics, and I think things to kind of think about slightly more holistically. I think the whole network API piece for me is quite an interesting one. I think there's a sort of generic challenge in telco where people have built these great networks and assets, and more these days are actually struggling a little bit to monetize them. So they're looking at different ways to do that. And I think the whole network API piece is a great way of doing it. One thing we're doing our end to try and drive sort of increase in adoption is that we're really focusing on that kind of voice and messaging, DID, end-to-end automation story. So for us, we think providers should be able to come onto our platform in real time, order a number, and then have the end-to-end service fully automated if it's a global proposition, into the regional telco. So you've got one central point where you can go and build and then automate right the way through the supply chain. Certainly some of the themes coming out of our CPaaS providers and CCaaS providers is really all around driving automation. So, they're all interested in automating as far down the supply chain as they can get, because that gives them increased efficiencies, cost savings, EBITDA savings, all the stuff that you need these days. And I think the world's changed. 2 or 3 years ago, the CPaaS market was all revenue. There's definitely been a step change in terms of how people look at these businesses these days, and it's certainly much more about EBITDA and generating profit and actually expanding out of some of the more traditional CPaaS related channels like messaging and moving into that customer experience place. So for me, I think that's a really interesting kind of hot topic. The other thing we're seeing quite significantly in our supply base is consolidation in our partner base, So more and more suppliers have got 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 telcos plugged in, and the cost and overhead and complexity of managing all of that, given the kind of drive towards more of a CX play, we're seeing that as a really strong trend. I think we've got 8 or 9 conversations live right now where people are asking for a consolidated approach with a best-of-breed provider who, builds the stuff in the right way, but is able to really let the CPaaS provider focus on monetizing its software layer, maybe a bit less so than the telco layer that's been happening for the last 3 or 4 years. So I would call them out as, I think, key big trends. I think in general, certainly in the market globally as we see them, there's a drive to get more efficiencies into all of these businesses and really continue on top line growth, and focus, I would say is the other word, focus on the things that are going to really let a provider differentiate itself. And certainly from our point of view, we've got a really long, strong heritage in building at scale networks and making them consumable in an API first model. And that's really the direction of travel I think we're heading in.
I have to think, when you talk about this new generation of networks, AI is coming, or it's already here, doing many things, but we're looking at an AI revolution that also requires new things, different things from the automation, supply chain, but also the network itself. What do you see of that from where you sit?
So I think there's a whole load of places that AI is really going to begin to play a part in these markets. I think agentic AI is the really obvious one. And how do you get agentic AI to drive efficiencies and drive better customer outcomes and experiences? I think for me, that's really driving this coming together of the CCaaS and CPaaS markets into customer experience platforms. So I think for me, that's the big one. Now, how that plays out in kind of practice, I think is a little bit grey at this point in time. And I think I don't see a world where agentic AI takes the whole communication stream away from some of the more traditional channels. But what it should do is it should take away some of the more simpler engagements and requirements, and then allow the more complex interactions to happen when it needs to happen. So I see that as being quite a big one. I think as well, the kind of network protection stuff and smarts around fraud and misuse, I think they're really interesting areas from an AI perspective that people are only really beginning to get their head around. So driving misuse out of the and sort of fraud and spoofing and spamming out the telco market's a really big drive right now, and I think AI's got a massive part to play in it. I think the other part is just around network automation and using AI to quickly accelerate deploying network nodes, providing enhanced protection, automated scaling, all of those things that allow telcos to really deliver what they're good at. Putting an AI lens on it, I think, is a fascinating angle. And I think the last part that I'm certainly just beginning to have a play with is kind of at a human day-to-day level, how can tools like AI begin to drive better, more efficient use of personnel? So I've been using Copilot a little bit this week. Help me define target operating models, help me come up with strategic planning, not have to attend every meeting, get the notes captured. All of those things, you look at the compound impact of that across enterprises and organizations, and all of that really begins to drive increased efficiency and increased focus. So for me, I think they're the sort of 3 or 4 areas that I think from an AI point of view is really fascinating. And I think organizations big and small now are beginning to have an approach that says, what can AI do to help us drive more efficiency? What can AI do to help us optimize? What can AI do to help us not have to invest in, more people or infrastructure or whatever? So I think it's really exciting. We do have to just temper that a little bit with, we're always at the cutting edge of this sort of stuff in telco and in tech, and the real world's quite a long way behind, and it's not always right. And there's lots of considerations market by market around GDPR and data protection and all those sort of things. So I think we're in that early kind of optimism phase. We've got some more phases to go yet, but for me, it's a super interesting sort of point to keep thinking on and looking at in this space specifically.
Yes, excellent. We're going to be talking about all of these topics: AI, customer experience, the move towards intelligent engagement, the role for telco and channel, the go-to-market. All of that stuff is part of the event in September. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here and giving your views on that. I look forward to seeing you in September in Amsterdam, and then we have 2 days to dive deep into all of these topics. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks, Rob. Look forward to seeing you there, and it's going to be a great event.